Well, that comes back to the point that we're making. I mean, the first thing is, it would be odd to say that we'd ignored the UN, since we actually...
But if you go against a UN resolution, are you not?
Well, we mustn't go against the UN resolution.
If you go without the UN resolution, are you
but
not?
The point that I'm making is this. There are only one set of circumstances. I mean, the reason I won't give the absolute undertaking that Jeremy was asking me to give is because of this one set of circumstances where Resolution 1441, the one that's been passed, where everyone's agreed on, if that is breached and the inspectors say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do our job, and in those circumstances, the Resolution 1441 effectively says, well, then a second resolution issues. If someone then at that point vetoes, wrongly, what do we do? Because if
it's only you that thinks it's wrong, and like George Bush thinks they're doing that unreasonably.
No, because...
It's the point of the veto, not that can happen in that sort of situation.
Because what happens is that the 50 members of the Security Council, there's 5 permanent members, and the 5 permanent members have got the veto. The other ones don't. Now, the issue of the veto only arises if we've got a majority of people on the Security Council with us. So there's not Britain and America that would be doing this on our own in any event. There's a very simple explanation of that. I mean, in respect of much of this information, it's only coming to light now. Some of the intelligence about what has happened earlier is only coming to light now. In respect of other stuff, however, we are cooperating with the inspectors. We are trying to give intelligence to the inspectors the whole time to allow them to do the work.
End of November. These were satellite photographs that were taken before and in one case during and other cases after UN inspection. So they could have been made available to them at the time of the inspection.
Of course, but we are...
Did they lose them?
No, we do make the information available to the inspectors. But where, for example, you have evidence that they're moving stuff before the inspections, obviously, then there's not much point in the inspections taking place in those circumstances. Now, in fact, I think in this particular instance, they did do the inspection, but, you know... Don't be under any doubt at all. We are trying the whole time to cooperate with the inspectors and give them what intelligence we can. But there isn't really much doubt about what is going on inside Iraq. They're trying to conceal the stuff.
The question referred to you, by the way, Prime Minister, as Vice President and Honourable Member for Texas North. But it's not just him. I mean, when a great world figure like Nelson Mandela calls the British Prime Minister the American Foreign Minister, don't you feel embarrassed?
I have huge respect for Nelson Mandela, but I don't feel that I'm doing the wrong thing. And I may not be doing the easy thing, but I do believe I'm doing the right thing.
So when people say you're a poodle...
Yeah, well, you know, you can do that and, you know, the right honourable member for Texas. I mean, look, it depends whether you want to deal with this at the level of humour and satire or whether you want to try and make sense of what are difficult issues. Now, look, I'm faced with a situation here where... You know, we know the history of Iraq, we know these weapons of mass destruction, we can see in our own country, for example, what is happening with the problems of international terrorism. I simply tell you, you believe it, don't believe it.
Well,
now, hang on a minute, I just want to finish this thing.
Okay.
Because this is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, even though I know it is difficult and unpopular in certain quarters. It is a matter of time before these issues of chemical, biological, nuclear weapons, which are now increasingly easy to get hold of with irresponsible, unstable states proliferating them, it is a question of time before that comes together with international terrorism in a devastating way for this country and other countries in the world. And I've said this before, it may be, even if I'm the only person left saying it, I'm going to say it. It is a threat and a danger that we have to confront. And there is no reason for these people to have these weapons in this way. There is no reason why they can't cooperate with the UN. And these terrorist groups out there, they are trying every day as we speak to get hold of this stuff and use it. These are not separate threats, they're related and linked.
You know your own defence intelligence assessment is that there is currently no link between Baghdad and Al-Qaeda.
No, they didn't say that. What they said was, which is absolutely right, is that historically Al-Qaeda, which wants these Arab states to become religious states, that Al-Qaeda obviously would regard Iraq as a secular state, and relations between Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein would not have been of any great historical importance. That is not to say, in circumstances where Iraq faces a threat from possible military action, and Al-Qaeda have also been subject to action being pursued at international level, they aren't coming together. And there is evidence that links the two. I've never suggested that Iraq is responsible.
I mean, this is the Defence Intelligence Staff Terrorism Analysis Cell, a paper to you on the 12th of January. There have been contacts between Al-Qaeda and the regime in the past. It is now assessed that any fledgling relationship foundered due to lack of trust.
First of all, it wasn't a paper to me. I mean, I know the BBC...
Well, you're on the circulation list.
I'm not actually on the circulation list. I know the BBC keeps saying it was a paper to me that I'm on the circulation list, as we keep telling them it isn't. The papers that I get are from the Joint Intelligence Committee. That was a paper primarily, actually, about the relations between Iraq and terrorism more generally. And I can absolutely assure you the evidence that we have is not that Iraq was responsible for the 11th of September or some such thing. I don't suggest that, but what Colin Powell was talking about yesterday is correct. The poison factory in northern Iraq, not strictly under the control of Saddam, is run by operatives that have people in Baghdad, and the stuff that they are producing there, which includes ricin and other poisons, we believe has been dispersed throughout the world. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying to you that's the reason why we're taking action against Saddam. It isn't. But it would not be correct to say there's no evidence linking al-Qaeda in Iraq.
If that danger that you and George Bush perceive apparently independently is as real as you suggest, where else are you prepared to follow him in action?
Hang on, you say apparently independently. I mentioned this issue of weapons of mass destruction in February 2001. I majored on it in my press conference with George Bush before 11th September had happened. 3 days after 11th September, when I went to the House of Commons, I said the next issue on our agenda is weapons of mass destruction. The worry is not just Britain and America. As you could see from the 8 other European leaders that signed letters last week, in fact the 10 Eastern European Union leaders, this is a worry to anybody who looks at this seriously. And to be fair to France and Germany may have a difference about how we're tackling this problem, but they don't have any difference with us that it is a problem.
All right, let's take some of these other countries. I mean, you were asked about North Korea in the Commons last week. You said we have to confront North Korea about its weapons program. When someone shouted, when do we stop? You said we stop when the threat to our security is properly and fully dealt with. What does that mean?
It means that in respect of each of the countries that poses a threat with these weapons of mass destruction, we confront them and try and deal with it. And you will deal with it in different ways in different countries.
So you're willing to attack North Korea?
No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is you cannot ignore the risk. Look, North Korea is a country that is, its people are starving, incidentally, but is virtually living on the export of ballistic missile technology. Their nuclear scientists are people who are working for other countries as well as North Korea. And I'm simply saying to people, if you allow this stuff to proliferate, if you allow it to be traded in, and there are companies, so-called supposedly respectable companies in the world trading in this stuff, the terrorists are trying to get hold of it. They will succeed at some point unless we deal with it.
Prime Minister, you said of Iraq that it was only the threat of force that got the UN weapons inspectors back in there.
Yes.
And you're not prepared to say the same about North Korea, which has, as you know, thrown out inspectors.
Well, I'm not saying that in respect of North Korea that I agree with them throwing out the inspectors. What I'm saying is you will adopt different strategies for different countries. And
Mr. Prime Minister, I mean, the question's nearly always been asked, almost been asked already.
That's a compliment for you then.
Let's see what it is first.
Yeah. Since September the 11th, obviously the United States has sort of been aggressive towards Afghanistan and now Iraq. Where's it going to stop? Who's going to be next?
Well, you know, where does it stop? It stops when we've dealt with these two twin issues, which is, as I say, unstable states who are developing weapons of mass destruction and international terrorism. I think this is the threat the world faces today.
But does that mean that we'll be tagging along on Mr. Bush's shirt tails all the time?
No, but it means...
Well, that's what it's looking like at the moment.
Well, we've got to do what's right for us, okay? And what I'm saying to you is I believe this is a threat that concerns us. You see, I think in the world that we live in today, which is an interdependent world, there is no way that any of these states could use this type of weaponry and us not be involved in this in some way. You know, you saw with Afghanistan or the 11th September attack, there's no way Britain could have stood apart from that. I mean, we could have taken a back seat, but we were still involved.
What?
You know, the terrorists that are operating in countries today, they're operating in Britain, yes, but they're operating in France, they're operating in Sweden, they're operating in Italy, they're operating in countries that haven't taken a high profile in this.
But it was only last week that the US warned Pakistan about its terrorist links. Are they going to be next? And bearing in mind that our historic links with Pakistan, what position does that put us in?
We adopt different strategies, I say, for different countries. Some we will sit down and negotiate with. The reason why the strategy we have in relation to Iraq is that we've gone through a history of aggression from Iraq. And the United Nations resolutions are there because of Iraqi aggression. But you're not wrong. There are real issues to do with Pakistan. India and Pakistan, and the potential for conflict there, is still a huge issue.
Yes, but the US warned them regarding their terrorist links last week. It was reported in the Times. So where do we stand with that one then?
Well, we fully support that warning. In fact, we've been talking to the Pakistanis ourselves about doing this. But let's be clear, the difference is that Pakistan has not launched an external war of aggression. Now, that's not to say there aren't real issues to do with weapons of mass destruction and Pakistan.
Anyway.
Well,
This gentleman...
Korea and in Iraq, is it purely based on oil? Because Iraq's oil-producing country in Korea isn't?
No, I mean, let me just deal with the oil thing, because this is one of the you know, we may be right, we may be wrong. I mean, people have their different views about why we're doing this thing. But the oil conspiracy theory is honestly one of the most absurd when you analyse it. The fact is that, I mean, if the oil that Iraq has were our concern, I mean, we could probably cut a deal with Saddam tomorrow in relation to the oil. It's not the oil that is the issue, it is the weapons, which is why the UN resolutions have gone over 12 years in relation to the weapons, and why we've actually allowed Iraq to export oil, but we've had to try and keep it in an account used for food and medicine because of our worry that otherwise it would be used to buy arms.
The three biggest countries against war at the moment is Russia, China and France, and they've all signed agreements with Saddam to explore the western oil fields. Is that why they're against it? Because they're frightened that if the US and Britain go in, the contracts will be torn up?
No, I don't think that's the reason either, actually. I mean, and let's wait and see where France and Russia and China end up on this. I mean, you know, there have been differences between us, between ourselves and France, between those countries you've mentioned and ourselves in the United States. But let's just be clear where we're all in common. We're all in common on Resolution 1441. We're all in common that Saddam has to disarm. We're all in common that the inspectors are the best way to do it. But actually, we're all in common also that if the inspectors can't do it, it's going to have to be done by force. The only issue between us really is, well, you know, when do you make the judgment that the inspectors can do it or not?
So at this moment in time in Great Britain, everything over the economy, everything else, the most frightening thing I should be scared of is Saddam Hussein.
I think the thing that you should be most worried about in terms of security, I mean, obviously there are economic issues in our country and the rest of the world today.
Okay.
But the thing to be most worried about, I would say, yes, is the link between terrorism and weapons of mass destruction.
All right,
I think
let's